Hello everybody, welcome back to Game On. My name is Justin and I have my trusty sidekick with me, Matt.
Wait, I'm the sidekick?
And today we are answering a question that was asked by the Tabletop Dungeoneers, and they were asking about how to run a Session Zero and why are they important?
Yeah, so Session Zero is a gaming term which may not be immediately obvious to newcomers, but the idea is a game session before the game actually starts, right? And so it's become a fairly common practice, but let's talk about why it's useful, and what benefits it has both for players and game masters.
So why would I even think about running a Session Zero? Well, to be honest, I was telling you today about how I couldn't run a campaign without a Session Zero because it feels like going outside to run without my shoes on. Feels like I'm missing a very important part of me, and a very important part of the campaign, to be more exact on that one.
Of you.
Yeah.
Boy, you take Session Zero very seriously if you're missing a part of you.
You know, I do take Session Zero quite seriously because...
And why do you take Session Zero so seriously, Justin?
I take them quite seriously because that's where I get to know my players and their characters a little bit better. And that's where we get to have our joint session on talking about what we expect from the game as players and as a GM, as well as fine-tune the games that we are about to play.
Well, yeah, so you said something very interesting there, I think. A joint session, right? So there's a couple ways to go about running a Session Zero, and a few reasons why to do that. So let's talk about one of the most important things as a group is setting expectations for what the game is going to be, right? This is a collaborative exercise we talked about a million times, and you want everybody who's there is supposed to be having fun and enjoying and being able to participate. And so you want to make sure that the tone and the content of the game is appropriate and is comfortable and is enjoyable and meets the expectations of everybody involved. Because, you know, when you're a GM and you're writing a game, or maybe you're playing a box stock, you know, module or whatever, your players don't really know what they're in for to a certain extent, right? Yeah. Like hopefully they don't know how the whole story turns out, because otherwise, you know, the suspense isn't there. You as a GM have certain expectations, whether you wrote it yourself or you're running something that was written by someone else. And you want to make sure those expectations match. Your players are getting what they're signing up for. Yeah. And some of that is the content, like we've talked about. Hey, you have designs on this dark horror campaign, and they want lighthearted, sort of cinematic, comedic adventure. Yep. Somebody's going to end up, if not disappointed, at least taken aback by it being a profoundly different experience than what they thought they were going to have. So you want to kind of talk that through in a Session Zero before you get into the storyline, so that everybody kind of is on the same page before you start reading material off the page. So yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think. You had talked about like content and making sure that people are comfortable.
Yeah, so my timeline is in the Session Zero. Before Session Zero, I'll send everybody a text, or I'll talk to them and be like, hey, this is the idea of the game I'm thinking about running. And then a couple of weeks later, everybody who's kind of joined in and said, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting, that's when we'll have a Session Zero. I personally, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is that I like to have everybody come together and talk around the table. And then a couple of weeks later, that's when you'll have your Session 1. But what I think is very important about my Session Zero is this is where I'm going to gauge the comfort level of both my players and the characters that they're making. Because, as you said, we don't want to run a horror game when someone wants a beer and pretzels game. But this is also where we will have a discussion as a table about where we will draw the line when it comes to curtain coming down. I don't like certain rated R things in my games. And as a player and as a game master, I want everybody to know that's where I'm not going to cross the line. because it's better to hash that out now in a session 0 than it is to have third session in and you get somewhere and someone's like, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to get offended or be made to feel uncomfortable with the content of the game, regardless of what that is, whether it's violence, whether it's mature content, whether it's religion, whether it's, I mean, there's a million things that could sort of impact different players different ways, right? So yeah, you want to talk that through, make sure everybody's boundaries are respected and that everybody's expectations are met, so that nobody gets an unhappy surprise midway through the game.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very, very important. There's also a practical reason for doing a session 0 with regard to character concepts, right?
Yeah.
People come into a game thinking that they have an idea for what they want to play, and you as a GM might have a certain assumption or set of ideas about what you think people are going to come up with. And sometimes those work out that everybody's on the same page, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they need a little sanding of rough edges and so forth. So session 0, before the plot line has started to unfold, is the ideal time for doing something like that. But, you know, when we were talking about this before we turned the cameras on, we were talking about the timing of it. I think that's very interesting, different aspects to things. Like, when do you run a session 0 relative to the content of the game? When you've written it, when you've partially written it, and then how long between a session 0 until the game actually starts with a session 1?
Yeah. What I found works for me, and it might not be for everyone, is that I would like to have 2 to 3 weeks in between my session 0 and my session 1.
Okay.
And the reason being is because I haven't fully written the campaign yet. Because, again, I'm big on this saying, and I've said it in multiple videos, that this is our game and not my game as the game master. So if I don't know what your characters are and where they're going to be in the long run from their backstories and from how you build bonds with your fellow players, how can I write a fulfilling story with them in it if I don't know who they are yet?
Well, and they may not know who they are yet, especially if you envision a session 0 as the time in which people create their characters, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people want to do that.
Yep. That's my preferred method.
Okay.
I know that you have a slightly different method from that.
I
guess, sort of. It's if from what I understand, you don't do it so much in a group setting.
Well, I mean, I'll take my cues from what the players want to do. If the players would like to generate their characters as a collaborative exercise, I'm all for it. But oftentimes people they have a character concept for a game and they wanted to develop that on their own to a certain extent, especially with regard to backstory. People will write, you know, with varying degrees of complexity and specificity, their backstory, and that's usually done by themselves, right? So if they wrote their backstory before they generated their character, then that can work in a group setting. If they generated their character and then wrote their backstory, that probably happens before a session 0 to a certain extent. And then we fine-tune or finalize that character at a session 0 if we want to. But one of the things that I like for a session 0 is a way to introduce each other, the GM and the player, to the story on the part of the GM and the character on the part of the player, so that we can integrate those two things. Because ideally, if a character that does have a backstory, a history, we want those elements worked into the storyline. But I need to become familiar with who this character is, what their backstory is, what the elements of their history can be woven into my storyline. And a session 0 is the ideal place for that. So much so that sometimes I'll run session 0s, individual session 0s for individual players. They'll be one-on-ones. And this is really just a getting people into gear. Getting them into the headspace of their characters and getting a feel for how they're going to play that character and the elements that they're going to emphasize. If there's something problematic in their history, maybe that's the session where we say, okay, how can we tweak this? How can we evolve it so that it can actually work in the later storyline of a campaign later on? In terms,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about. The reason why I don't like to do that myself, personally, is just because, let's say Roger texts me, "Oh, what's Matt making? Oh, he's making this. Oh, do you know what like skills he's going to try to have and what I might need to cover? Ah, crap! Now I have to talk to him and ask him what he's doing, and like I have to create a spreadsheet in my head, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather them sit together at a table and say, I see that you don't have this. I was thinking about maybe having a character that could do that, so let me do it."
Well, that certainly in a group setting can work well, but you can also take the obvious out and say, talk to Roger. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah,
like,
but if they don't know each other yet,
right? Compare your concepts if you want to, you know, and sure, yeah. If they don't know each other, they're coming from disparate places, then maybe that doesn't work as well. But you know, the pros and cons of having sort of an intensive one-on-one thing can really cement a character and give me plot ideas that I can really run with.
I agree with that.
So again, look, there's no one correct way to do this thing versus another, but and I've done both, and I've had success with both, and I've had problems arise from both. So again, there's no right answer to this. What I do think is the right answer is the complexity of your game, the length of the game, campaign, and so forth, the storyline. It's directly proportional to the importance of a session zero, right? If you're doing a one shot, you probably don't need a session zero. If you're doing a 3-4 episode sort of mini, it might be helpful, but it's not essential. Yeah. If you're doing a season-long campaign, man, you better do a session zero, because it's going to save you so much heartache, and it's going to make for a richer gaming experience. It's going to make it easier to write stories and subplots and side quests and all the kinds of stuff that can come out of from the characters, inspired by characters. You just have that much of a head start in doing that stuff if you have a session zero.
Some more objective reasons why I like to have a session zero is because this is where I can hammer out any of my house rules.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I'd rather them know, like, from the beginning that, like, hey, you know, we're going to use, like, Pathfinder for an example. I'm going to use encumbrance rules. You know, maybe we're not used to that, but now we are. Be like, wait a second, now I have to keep track of everything? I'd rather them know that now. Or we can negotiate whether or not that's something that the table wants. Like, as a game master, I might want that, but if the rest of the table doesn't, then I'll give it to the majority.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were talking about expectations, right? You want to give your players an active say in the experience that you all are going to participate in collaboratively. Some things are going to be deal breakers, right? Yep. Some things is like, look, my story doesn't work without this, so we need to have this element, and if you guys don't like it, I'm sorry, but my story requires this. In order for the story to work, it has to have this. So get used to it.
Yeah. I don't want to go to hell. Well, we're playing Descent into Avernus, so...
I am uncomfortable with hell, Justin. I'm just saying you're going to have to rewrite it to be heck, because I'm uncomfortable with hell.
Fair enough. You know what's also really good to do at Session Zero? Hammer out the time that you're going to play every week.
Oh, yeah, practical stuff.
It's a pain in the ass to just, again, texting people and being like, well, some of us can do 6:30 on Thursday, some of us can do 5:15 on Fridays. It's like, well, how about we all get together and just hash out when we're going to play? Try to have Session Zero on the day that you want to play, but if that doesn't work, try to come up with something that works for everyone.
Yeah, no, I think building a routine and getting everybody on, again, it's all about expectations, right? And some of that is mundane stuff, like who shows up where and when at whose house and who's bringing chips. And some of it is sort of, you know, high-minded, heady role-playing stuff about, you know, what your character's grand concept is. So all of that stuff and needs to be hammered out in some form or another, and a session 0 is kind of the best place to do it.
Yeah. I have 4 questions I like to ask players in a session 0.
Yes.
I'm going to pretend like we're in a session 0. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Okay, Matt, this is session 0.
Yeah.
We're about to play Cyberpunk Red. It doesn't really matter what we're playing, but let's just pretend that. What's one thing that you love doing as a player in RPGs? And this is as the GM taking notes.
I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, tripping up the GM. I love that. No, but no, more specifically, yeah, I like problem solving. I like puzzle solving. That's one of my favorite things. Using my brain and using my character's brain. I love that.
Okay, what's something that you've always wanted to do but haven't had the chance to do yet in an RPG?
I'll be honest. I've never been a netrunner character in an RPG, and Cyberpunk is sort of the default, game for that. I've never done that element.
How about this? What's 1 or 2 things that you never want to do again in an RPG?
Owl bears.
Okay.
No owl bears ever. It's the dumbest creature in any game system ever. Owl bear. Just dumb.
You know what? What's really funny is that Troy, who's also playing in this game, Facility D20, he said the same thing. So that's pretty cool.
Sweet.
So I know not to do any owl bears.
All owl bears.
Okay, yeah.
Which probably wouldn't come up in a Cyberpunk game, but you never know.
Probably not. But actually, one of the reasons why I like to do this around the table is that somebody could piggyback off of somebody's idea and say, hey, I have something similar to that. So here's my last question for you, and you can answer this within the next 2 weeks. Just give me a call or a text.
This is going to be a long video.
Yeah, what do you expect from me as a game master? Besides the obvious, do you expect anything special out of me? And again, shoot me a text within 2 minutes.
Oh, you don't want me to try to answer now?
No, you don't have to give me an answer right now.
Oh, just think so much good material here.
Okay, give me an answer right now if you got one.
No, you're right. Something like that, expectation, something broad-based like that should be thought about. It shouldn't be off the cuff, even if it's funny.
And if you don't have an answer, that's fine too.
Yeah, and you can punt on the answers to any of those questions and say, oh, well, I don't have anything that's off limits, or I like owl bears, or whatever. But the idea is to start that exchange of information and set, help those expectations get set in stone so that everybody goes into it knowing what's going to happen and they are happy about it. So
yeah, and this helps me as a game master make a better game campaign for the table.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point here, right? Is make a better gaming experience for all concerned. A session 0 helps you prepare better as a GM, which takes stress away from the GM. Like you feel like you're more on top of the game and you've got more material and nuance built into it. So I think that that's really valuable just from an enjoyment standpoint as well as from a practical standpoint. And then players get better at their characters when they've had longer to think about them. Yeah. So a session 0 is a way to evolve and create nuance in a character development too.
Definitely.
So yeah, I mean, session 0, do it. There's really no reason not to. As far as I'm concerned.
I think they're very important. Is there anything that you think that you should do in a session 0 that we haven't covered? Is there anything that you do?
Oh, you're talking to them now.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, guys, tell us what we got wrong. Or tell us experience that you've had that session 0 played an important role for better or even for worse in how a game then proceeded from that point forward. We'd like to know if your experience and your thoughts sort of mirror our own, or if you have a different perspective.
Yes, I'd like to again thank the Tabletop Dungeoneers for asking us this question.
Questions are awesome, and we really do enjoy and talk over these questions and sort of pick how we're going to approach them. So it's a big help to us. We hope you're getting something out of it and enjoying the answers. Keep them coming.
Yep. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.
Thank you as always. Game on, guys.